Yeah. Okay, my name is Beth Friday. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I work in our Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, which is our private lands program. So you probably are most familiar with the refuge system. That's probably one of the biggest parts of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We also have law enforcement, federal law enforcement officers. And then we have something called ecological services, and that's where our endangered species staff work. That's where our habitat restoration programs are located. We have something else called CPA, which is conservation planning assistance. And so I work in our habitat restoration program, which means I work with private landowners who volunteer to do habitat restoration. So nothing that I do is regulatory, but we have a lot of demand because people really do like to do good things for wildlife, especially if you aren't telling them they have to do it. So it's called the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program. It's our private lands program. So a private landowner is a farmer, a homeowner. We also consider counties and municipalities, those local governments eligible for our program.
Thank you. Erin, I think we have somebody from your department that's going to be joining us. She's going to be a little late, but she works for the Spotted Lantern Fly Group, so you'll probably be recognizing somebody. But do you want to go?
Yeah. So my name is Aaron Geikema. I'm the state director for the USDA APHIS Wildlife Services program in New Jersey. My program mainly deals with wildlife that causes problems. Whether it is birds and deer running across airports and causing problems for planes, or whether it's overabundant geese that are causing problems in parks, whether that's issues with water quality or if it's aggressive geese that are chasing folks. That's what I do. Here in New Jersey, we have about 20 something folks that work for me, kind of spread out throughout the state. We work cooperatively with whether it's county park systems, whether it's airports, or whether it's private landowners. We do that through cooperative service agreements where folks are basically paying for our services to help them resolve their human-wildlife conflict. So that's a little bit about USDA Wildlife Services.
And Amy?
Sure. My name is Amy Jones. I'm a project manager with Du Bois Environmental Consultants. So we are actually a private firm. We are consultants for anything that varies from developers to county parks to solar companies, utility companies. What I love about what we do is we're doing something different every day. We do wetland delineations and permitting through state regulations. Basically, we tell people where they can't build or get permits to build something under the current state rules. We do threatened endangered species surveys for, again, development projects or habitat conservation plans. We do construction monitoring, so we do a lot of utility work. So when First Energy and PSE&G and all these utility lines are redoing their lines, they also have to be compliant with the rules. So we'll do bog turtle surveys and wood turtle surveys, or make sure what they're doing doesn't impact listed species. So we've done habitat mitigation, wetland mitigation. So what we do kind of runs the gamut. But yeah, that's what we do.
That's awesome. So I think I just want to start with a question, but anybody, I think, be free to unmute your mics. I kind of just wanted it to be very discussion based. But my first question is for you, Amy. You're our second, maybe third speaker this semester who said something about wetland delineation. Mm-hmm. And just by having taken wetland ecology at Rutgers, I know that the delineation test is something that prepares for. How important do you think delineation is for students? Because it's not something that they really tell us is important while we're in school, but you're like,
So,
this,
well,
yeah.
it depends on what you end up wanting to do. For example, I really don't know of anybody that delineates wetlands other than maybe the state. The DEP has various bureaus or divisions. So it's the division of, they're now called Land Resource Protection. So they are individuals that work for the DEP that review our line. So we submit something and say, here's what we think is our wetland delineation. It comes out and says, yes, I agree, or I want you to move point number 5 feet out, or so we do a lot of coordination with the state reviewers. So really, it's either a consultant delineating wetlands, or you're with the state or even the federal government with the Corps reviewing them. But what we do, it's very important. I was in the woods all day today delineating wetlands. I did not know how to delineate a wetland in college. It's not something I learned how to do. I learned, on the job training. I actually took the Rutgers continuing education course. They have a delineation, sort of a certification, where they have a plant course, a soils course, and a vegetation ID course. And those are the 3 things that you need to know in order to delineate a wetland. The state does not have an approved list per se. You don't have to be, you don't get put on a list as to who they accept a wetland delineation from, but they know who knows what they're doing and who doesn't. We do have in our firm, I think, 4, it's a professional wetland scientist. So it's a certification that you get through the Society of Wetland Scientists, and it's based off of experience and credits for certain courses, and then you get that PWS certification. So I think mostly it's within it's something that we do basically for development in New Jersey. So we delineate areas that people either cannot develop or have to stay out of, or we get them permits to disturb a wetland under the state rules. So that's basically the long and short of it. So that's actually good. You guys have a course. Where I went, there was no course. So Rutgers does have a leg up on that.
Yeah.
And I'll add to what Amy's saying is that in school I had soils class, plant class, what was the third thing? Hydrology, wetland classes, but they never really put them together. And then I also took those Rutgers delineation classes, not because I need to delineate a wetland for regulatory reasons, more like I need to understand where a wetland is to do restoration, because the wetlands that we work in have been altered. And so you oftentimes don't have the plant component. So I took that class to help me understand when I'm working in a wetland so that I can restore wetlands rather than trying to create a wetland, which without a lot of work, those tend to not be as successful. NRCS does a lot of wetland delineation. That's the Natural Resource Conservation Service, because they work with farmers. And there's a part of the Farm Bill that says you have to be compliant with wetland rules and not to be eligible for their programs, which have financial incentives, you can't be destroying wetlands. And so sometimes it comes up, someone is unclear if they have a wetland, so they want to farm it, but they don't know if it's a wetland. So NRCS will do wetland delineations in that case. So yeah, I think that's an important skill.
Yeah, it seems extremely important. I know there are other skills that are a little bit more in focus, like GIS and things, but wetland is something that I keep hearing that we are very fortunate to have. So I think as a graduating student, I could tell the other students, take wetland ecology. And we have a professor, Dr. Mila Aronson. She does plant stuff, and she's an urban ecologist, and she can get you sorted with taking the wetland delineation test. It requires a lot of studying because soils are covered within the class, but it's not as comprehensive as the soil classes at Rutgers, but it is enough to be qualified. That's really.
Yeah, I'd say those GIS classes are very important too, particularly for entry level work. I do a lot of GIS, but it's really the I use it as a communication tool to make maps to show people what I want them to do. But for any kind of analysis or creating maps or all of that, like, I think that's really important for entry level work.
Yeah, GIS is huge. With what we do, every report we prepare has GIS mapping. People we hire right out of school, do you know how to use ArcView? That's one of the first questions. So whether we're delineating wetlands, doing habitat maps, anything like that, GIS is the first thing that's done. And then we use those base maps and, basically create a wetland, in terms of regulatory, there's other requirements. They need topo surveys by a surveyor, but in terms of, evaluation of impacts, aerial maps are huge. So I agree with Beth. GIS, put that on your list of things to be proficient in when you come out of school, because everybody uses that no matter what we're doing in this field. GIS maps are involved.
Yeah, can you use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and GIS? Those are the 4 programs I need you to know.
How advanced in GIS would you say your work is?
It depends.
Sorry?
It depends. Like, what I do is not a lot of analysis. I use it more as a communication tool. But certainly there is, in my office, like in the Endangered Species Program, they do use it for analysis.
That's good to know.
I think if you, so go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, wait, so what did you say, the 3 programs that you need to know, or like you said Word, GIS, and
Excel
Oh,
and PowerPoint. Because
PowerPoint. Okay.
a lot of what we do is communicate. And like, working with private landowners, mostly what I do is communicate. And I think probably as a wildlife biologist, the most important thing you will do is communicate. And those are all, except for Excel, which is more of a data keeping. Those are all tools that help you communicate better.
That's good to hear, because I've been, hoping for a while that I could do something in the near future with my job that involves educating people, because I really want to do that with, my work, like educate people about environmental issues as I'm, with my research and stuff, and help, because I think that's a really important thing right now. It's spreading awareness to people, the everyday person, who may not know this kind of stuff, like letting them know about these things and what they can do to, help mitigate these damages and help, assist you guys, in your work,
Yeah, but not even just from an education perspective. Everything I do as a federal employee, I document. I go out and do a site visit and I document it.
Yeah.
Like, what did I use my time on? What did I learn? What do I need you to know about that? So like, it's in every aspect of the work that you do. Even if you think you're just collecting data and I'm just going to analyze this data and it's just me and this data and my animals, like, what does that mean if you don't communicate what you learn? So communication is really, really important.
Right. Well, because I've said, someone discovers electricity, okay, great, but if you can't communicate to people, then what's the point? Like, no one knows how to use electricity, then it's pointless. And then there's all these other things that never happen. So you got to be able to communicate stuff. And that's.
I have a question for maybe all of you that I know is on my mind, but I would imagine is on everybody else's mind. What sort of entry-level positions do you have at all of your respective places of employment, and like how difficult is it, and what's something that is absolutely imperative that's on somebody's CV, or else they get thrown to the bottom of the stack?
So at least for us, our entry-level positions are wildlife technician positions. You can go on to the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, and it'll tell you what the qualifications are. You've got to meet the minimum qualifications. If you graduate with a degree from RUTWS in ecology, you're going to meet the minimum qualifications for the wildlife technician series. And what we're looking for is, experience with wildlife, experience, environmental experience, But I will say, at least with the RUTWS graduates that we've hired in the past, I mean, because we typically hire wildlife technicians, and the RUTWS students will qualify as a technician, but they might not have the qualifications to meet the federal qualifications for a wildlife biologist. Typically, I think the RUTWS graduates are typically missing some of the plant classes, believe it or not, to qualify as a wildlife biologist. So it's something worth checking out with the Office of Personnel Management, just to qualify, or just to double check your qualifications, that you have the right mix of classes to meet those qualifications.
I'll jump in on our end. Because we're private, we don't have a list of specific qualifications per se. Typically a 4-year degree is something that we require, but it's sort of based on what do we need at that time, and it's largely based off of field work. So spring is our busy season, so we'll typically hire maybe a seasonal at maybe March, around March, April, and they assist with monitoring. It's not glamorous, it's boring sometimes. They have to go through the safety training for utilities, and it's basically some projects, it's a wood turtle clear out survey, and they go and clear an area before they go in with construction equipment, but it's usually monitoring. We teach wetlands. We will train people for wetland work, but it's usually field work. It's if we have a snake study, they check snake traps. That's that type of thing, but it's basically field work. And then as we move along, if it's a good fit, then we can turn it into more of a permanent or a full-time position. But yeah, it's usually starting off as a seasonal with field work. And again, you're always out with somebody. We're not throwing you out there to do it by yourself. One, because you're not qualified, but two, you get trained out in the field on stuff like that. And then we just take it as it goes. If it's a good fit, we keep on. And we tell, these employees from the beginning that our field work typically ends, in the fall, and then we kind of go from there. So it's more of a, what do we have on the docket for this year? And then we evaluate each candidate based off of their experience and their interview. Interviews are huge. It's not necessarily what's on your resume. It's how you present yourself in the interview. A lot of times it's, we've had a lot. Here's my one suggestion to everybody. Don't lie in your interview. You'd be shocked at how many kids come out of school and say they know how to do something, and we rely on that. And then we get them in the office and they say, well, yeah, I don't know how to do GIS. So, basically that didn't last. So just be upfront with your experience. And that's about it. Yeah, don't lie in your interview.
That's really great stuff, Amy and Aaron. And I would add to that, what I look for is something that makes you stand out. And like Amy was saying, like having a field skill, because everybody's going to graduate with pretty much the same classes. So what have you done to make yourself stand out? What have you done to bring some expertise to the table? And it doesn't have to be a paid job. It just, I've found this thing interesting, and so I started studying it. I wrote a little paper about it. I did a little educational course, like anything that you can make yourself special and stand out, like what is your skill that you're bringing to the table? When I look at a cover letter, I look for, like, your resume will speak of all of that technical stuff about you, but the cover letter, I look for, why do you want this job? Why do you want to work for this organization? How will you make my organization better? So like I look for some really personal, not personal details, but like I thought about this job. I know how I fit in, I see myself there. And if you can make your cover letter reflect that, you're not going to get put in that don't look again pile. You know, you're going to get a second look. That cover letter to me is important because if you can communicate well in that cover letter, I know you can communicate. And again, for me, that's really, really important. In the interview, I look for someone who can be a team player. So, you know, not every job is teamwork, but in this field, we tend to do teamwork. And, you know, the federal government, we usually hire permanent. It's very difficult to get fired. So we're really careful. We're like, okay, you're going to be in this job for a long time. You're going to be working with me for a long time. Are you a team player? At the interview part, it's not so much what you know. It's like, I can work as a team. I can learn. I can think for myself, and I can ask questions. I'm not going to act like I know it all. Those are the kind of stuff I look for to work with a team. I put a link in the chat box for USA Jobs. That's how the federal government hires. And we actually are going to be advertising a position pretty soon. I think we're going to advertise it as a 7-9. And I think at the 7, you need a 4-year degree. And I think at the 9, you need either a master's or 2 years of professional experience. So it sounds like some of you guys might be eligible for that position. It's in our Conservation Planning Assistance Program, which is CPA. So basically, we have 4 programs. We have our endangered species biologist. We have our habitat restoration program. We have our NERDAR program, which is our contaminants program. And then CPA is the part of our office that works with other branches of government. So the Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act requires that federal agencies and the state agencies work with the Fish and Wildlife Service on issues that involve threatened or endangered species. And so our endangered species biologists are trying to recover species. So the CPA folks are the ones who work with all of those organizations to say, here's the way that you can do good things for, you know, whatever wildlife might be in your area. So like if it's taking out trees and this is an Indiana bat area, here's the time restrictions you can use. Here are the trees to avoid. It's helping people make good decisions about their projects. So that position will be a permanent position. And we'll have 2 certs, the 7 and the 9, which is the 4-year degree and the master's. And again, like that, your education experience is important, but you know, if you're interested in that, just think about like, how do I fit in that team? What does the Fish and Wildlife Service do? How can I make them see me as part of the team? And you know, let your strong resume talk for itself, but in your cover letter, really focus on how, you know, by the time we're done with that cover letter, we should be like, well, how have we survived without this person? You know, like we really want you part of our team. So if you focus, I would recommend focusing on that for your cover letter.
Should we like disseminate some information about federal resumes? Because I know that's very different than the CVs they're probably working on in class. I think I have some stuff about that, but USA Jobs requires a federal resume. Am I correct on that? Or could it be any resume?
I know that you can build a resume and you can upload a resume. I think I actually did it both ways, but I don't really think I know what a federal resume is. Do you know, Aaron?
Yeah, so what they're looking for is when you're specifying what positions you have, you know, previous jobs, previous experience, they use what they call qualifying experience. And they need to know, okay, was that job a full-time job? How many hours a week was that? You know, how long did you have the job? Because if it's like a seasonal part-time job, you know, they need to, the human resources people need to figure out how much time you actually have with that experience, whether it was 2 months, whether it was 52 weeks, you know, it is really what they're looking for. So, I mean, you can use your regular resume, but you want to make sure that you're specifying, okay, was it, you know, how many hours per week? Was it a full-time, part-time, seasonal type of position is what they're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, and a little bit about USA Jobs is that, so I said, I called something a cert. So you put in your data and there are people who, that, I mean, there'll be thousands of applications And there are people who their job is to look through those applications and put them together. Like, okay, you are a good fit, you're not a good fit. And so, and those people are not wildlife biologists. So you have to like be very clear in what you write and, you know, just kind of pitch the whole thing like they don't know what you're talking about. The other thing is you're going to do something called, I guess they're KSAs. And so it'll ask you like what your experience is compared to something. And so I would say don't lie, because we'll find out if you lie, but don't be modest. You know, if the question says, I know how to use Microsoft Word, and you're like, well, I use Word, maybe I'll give myself a 3. And then 4 is like, you know, you've published something, you know, a paper, just your paper at school. And then a 5 is, oh, I've taught people how to do it. So if you've helped people with Word, you can say that you have that expertise. So a lot of really good candidates, we don't get to see them because they're too humble. And then, you know, even though you're not supposed to lie, sometimes you see that the liar shows up and then you know it, you can tell. So just don't be humble in that part.
That makes sense.
I have a question for all the panelists. So outside of your classes and your educational background, what are some other experiences that you recommend students pursue to, you know, make them more experienced, or, you know, to kind of show on their CV or resume?
I'll jump in. I don't know if all of you are seniors or not. If anybody's a junior or sophomore, what I did and was a huge help was, you know, look for an internship, even if it's unpaid. The state hires seasonal biologists for shorebird work, Fish and Wildlife Service. Actually, I was a Fish and Wildlife Service biologist. That was my summer internship at the Forsyth Refuge. It turned into a full-time position. So all of that's what gets you in the door. Not only is it just a job with experience, but you network. You meet people through state, federal, private, and then all those people that you network with, you know, keep their information aside, get a card or you know, and then you have that contact for when you eventually do graduate. So, you know, go online, look for internships. I know a lot of schools, sometimes we do it at Stockton, you know, put up, you know, a flyer or online on your boards, you know, for summer work. And that would be my big suggestion, is to, between your junior and senior year or sophomore, junior, whatever, find that summer work that'll give you not only experience, but just as important, the networking and meeting people.
Yep, I agree. Going to meetings like this. I remember when I was graduating, I went to every meeting. I went to the Professional Wildlife Society meetings, I guess they call it AFWA now, CFWA. I went to school in the South. Like every meeting that you can go to, just to learn about. When you go to the meeting, you learn about what people are doing. So like you think you know what this profession looks like, but then when you go to those meetings, you see, oh, people are doing all kinds of things. And it helps you to know what you might want to do. It helps you to be seen. And like, if you're interested in something that somebody's doing, I know networking can feel kind of funny when you don't know them, but just think about, okay, what this person is doing and how you're interested, and just approach them and ask them about it. As people are really excited about bringing young professionals in, and we don't want you to feel like, well, I don't know anything, so I can't talk to this person. Just ask them about their work. And that's how you start to meet people and network. Because really, like, if you've worked with somebody that I know, or you've done something, like somehow I know you and your work ethic, you'll just stand out. So just like what Amy said, like, get involved as much as you can. I know when I was in school, internships were unpaid and nobody was paying my way but me, and I'm still paying most of my loans, but I got a job and people knew who I was. And A lot of people who worked over the summer, they're like, I need money. I'm like, well, I'm just borrowing it because I want a job. It's a sad truth.
Yeah. It's especially hard right now with COVID too, to get these types of things. So
Yep.
I feel,
Yeah, and don't be afraid, to even look at seasonal jobs. There's internships out there. There's a lot, I don't know now with COVID, but there's seasonal jobs, and that gives you experience in maybe a different area of the country, a different thing than you ever thought you'd end up working. But that's another way you can gain experience. Just be on the lookout for those. Whether it's employees that have worked for me have they've come to me from they're originally from New Jersey, but they spent like 3 summers working in Idaho working on something because they could find a position out there, and it was valuable experience when we hired them. So. Don't be afraid to, maybe branch out a little farther than you had expected. So
That's a really good point. So I was born and raised in Florida. I went to school in South Carolina and Kentucky, and now I'm in New Jersey. Florida, actually you can get a job in Florida because they have such a good turnover rate, because I think it kind of sucks there. That's why I left it. But anyway, you just go where the job is. Like, I have the best job in the Fish and Wildlife Service. I came to New Jersey. I was like, from Kentucky, I was like, what the hell does New Jersey have? And then I got here, like, it has so much to offer. So if you just keep your mind open to the different places, you can get the experience that would then let you be more competitive for that dream job in New Jersey if you want to come back here.
I just want to say, like, I don't think I'm alone with this, but I think like there are a number of people at Rutgers who in the ecology major who don't exactly have a very conventional path to the major, in terms of like it'll take them a little longer than some other people to like get there, like 'cause there's just so many classes you have to take and so little time. So like a lot of them like take like an extra semester or even like an extra year. Would that be detrimental to somebody like with a resume that like, oh, I had an extra year in college because I had to that was the way I had to get to all the stuff I needed or something, or would it not really matter that much?
Look, I wouldn't see that as a problem, because I mean, most people who go to school, they're young. You're on your own for the first time. The first year, you might completely mess it up and need another year. That's not unique. But if at the end you've got a good grade point average, you took all the classes, like that length of time, I mean, if like it's 10 years for a 4-year degree, I might scratch my head about that a little bit. But needing an extra time, I don't think that's a unique thing. I wouldn't look worse on that.
I hope
right.
not, because I'm
Good.
26.
Good, because I have kind of like my work style. I take a little bit longer to get to things sometimes, so it's like I try to take my time and get it right. So, it's cool. Good.
I mean, if your resume has long blocks of unexplained time, that leaves me wondering. Like, I think there was a lady we interviewed, and there was like a 4-year gap. And I think she was just like being a stay-at-home mom for those 4 years, which was fine, like not a problem at all. But you think like, oh man, like, did they get fired from that job and they were so terrible they couldn't find another job? So like, if you have big gaps, I think it would be helpful to explain them. But if it took you 5 years to do a 4-year degree, I don't know, Erin, what do you think? Amy, I just don't think it's a big problem.
No, not at all. If anything, it gives you more, maybe not more experience, but more, if you have additional classes. No, I don't think that makes a difference whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't think it's not a big deal to us. And to be honest with you, if someone's in their second or third job of their career or something like that, and they're continuing to progress, I don't really even look how long they were in school. I go, oh, do they have a degree? Okay, they've had this work history, good to go. So,
because like the thing about me is that I love to learn. So like I'm probably gonna take a lot of classes, and I don't want that to put me in jeopardy or anything with like, oh, it's taking him so long to get this done. What's wrong with him? Yeah.
That might be your expertise you come out with, is that you're just a jack of all trades. You know, you can do anything.
I have a question for you all. Do you think that a bachelor's is fine for your field, or do you think pursuing graduate school is worthwhile?
Well, I'll jump in. I only have a bachelor's. I do not have a master's. I kicked it around. And then like I said, I got a job with Fish and Wildlife Service right out of school. And I spoke with the biologists there, and we kicked it around, and you know, I kind of made the decision, and this was a personal decision, that I was going to get just as much experience in the field on the job training than I would have, you know, doing a master's thesis or whatever. I think it's different for every person, but personally, I do not. I'm making out just fine.
And I'll add on to what Amy was saying. I mean, I only have a bachelor's degree. You know, and I also had thought about, okay, you know, do I want to go back for a master's degree? Do I, you know, where do I want to go? And then, you know, I started with the federal government with USDA Wildlife Services, and, you know, it's just, you know, I've progressed, you know, through Wildlife Services. You know, I think, you know, students coming out with a master's degree, I think you might not have as much experience, but I think you start, at least in the federal system, as a higher grade. You know, I think master's degrees teach you, you know, certain ways of thinking. And I think gaining work experience is also valuable. So I think you need to think about, well, where do I want to end up? You know, I think you might progress a little bit quicker now with a master's degree than you would with just gaining experience through the system. And there are certain jobs, to be honest with you, that are looking for that master's degree to hire you. So that's something to consider.
Yeah. Hey, Erin, I don't know if this is true, but like, are there some grades you can't get with, like, grade levels you can't get without a master's? Like, are you capped?
No, you're not.
You're not. Okay.
In the federal system, you just have to have a year of experience at the previous grade level. So, you know, if you get hired in on a GS4 and you stick around long enough, you could keep progressing to a GS15.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I do have a master's, and I went straight from a bachelor's to a master's because I went to my undergrad at Clemson University, and I noticed that most of the graduate students had gray hair. And I was like, what? Why? Like, they had families and lives. And I'm like, why do they choose to go back to school? I don't know why. I just thought, like, well, I don't want to be gray hair getting a master's. So I just went straight through. And like, I did a research project on elk. It was really fun. Like, I think that master's experience helped me, it made me a better communicator, because I had to write a thesis and I had to present that idea to a group, and then you get people ask you questions about it. So the whole process just forced me to be a better critical thinker and to be a better writer. But yeah, I don't think, like, that job that we're advertising is a 7-9. Once you have enough experience to be a 9, it doesn't really matter. But what the master's does is it helps you, you know, kind of stand out a little bit from the crowd. But yeah, I know a lot of folks who just have the bachelor's and they're great biologists. They have, you know, great jobs, but like, I don't know, they paid me to go trap elk. That was really cool. So I did it.
That sounds incredible. Yeah, master's is something that I'm currently considering and pursuing, but I think that Rutgers has a very straight and narrow, like, bachelor's into PhD track, and we're a research university, research institution, so that is extremely commonplace. And a lot of our professors will advise against a master's because they feel like you're probably going to go to a PhD anyway, so why don't you go straight there? It'll be a little bit quicker for you. And I think if I could give any advice as a graduating senior to the people that are just coming into universities, don't really let that perspective sink into your head too much, because it probably will. And a question I have for you guys is, we do
Hey,
have
Shelley, can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
Because like the straight to PhD, like when I see somebody as a PhD for a 7, I'm like, they're way overqualified for that. And then I think if you have a PhD, you want to teach or you want to do research, like getting that PhD is another level to me that speaks something different versus if you have a bachelor's or a master's, it doesn't say anything different to me. But if you get a PhD, it does say to me like, you know, you put a lot of money in your education, there's a place you want to go, be it research, teaching, and like, why would you want my little 7? Like, I know you need to start somewhere, but it makes me wonder, like, is this going to be fulfilling to you? So I think there is, I mean, I think there is, like, it does say something when you have a PhD. It says great things if that's what you wanted to say, but if you want to be like my wildlife technician, it doesn't sound like, well, all right, this guy's going to want to hang out with me for a while.
So piggybacking off of what you said, Beth, that having done a thesis is really important to show communication skills. Rutgers has an option to do a thesis. So we have the George H. Cook Honors Program, which is a thesis. So you would do it. I know Lori is doing one. I'm doing one. I'm not sure who else here is doing one, but would you say that's comparable to having done the thesis in a master's? Would that show you the same skills?
So like it's an undergraduate thesis?
You
Yes.
still have to defend it and write up a manuscript,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's as long.
Yeah. To me, it says that you're like trying to go an extra step, trying to differentiate yourself, trying to get as much experience and skills, and you know, whatever that thesis process will shape for you. So yeah, I think that would be a good way to stand out.
Anybody else have any questions? I don't want to take up the airspace.
Well, can I just say one more thing about an advanced degree? So like I got my undergraduate degree at Clemson and I could have done a master's there too. But, you know, Clemson University is like, I have a game management degree. Like we were game managers. We were learning how to skin stuff and trap stuff and kill stuff, like classic game management. Awesome. I enjoyed it very much. But when I went for my master's, I wanted to go to another school to get another perspective. So then I went to the University of Kentucky for a forestry degree. And we were like just a bunch of pot smoking hippies over there. That was great too. It was fun. I loved it. But I learned to see the world so differently just by going through a different curriculum with a different set of colleagues, with a different set of teachers. And so it just helped my perspective grow. And that, you know, rather than like, okay, somebody said something and I think about what my professor told me, now I had this other way of thinking of things. And it just, I think it kind of helped me kind of shape my own ideas because I got to hear different kinds of ideas. So if you have that opportunity, if you want to do the advanced degree and you have the opportunity to do it somewhere other than you did your undergraduate degree, I think you can gain a lot from that.
That's very reassuring to me right now. My deadlines are coming up this month and I'm stressed, so that's extremely reassuring. I think every night I'm up until 3 a.m. being like, do I really want to do this? So, does anybody else have any questions?
If I may add something. Are there a lot of job opportunities in New Jersey? Because like I just wonder a lot if I will find a suitable long time or I don't know, any type of job here.
I mean, it can be challenging to find positions if you're limiting yourself geographically. You know, I think with the natural resources field, you know, there's positions out there. You know, as Beth was saying, she's had a chance to move around a little bit. I've moved around a little bit. I started you know, with Wildlife Services in Michigan, I worked in North Carolina, I came here. You know, there are positions, you just have to be willing, you know, I think being willing to move around helps, you know, because there's a limited number of positions, and, you know, it comes down to, well, you know, do you want to be, you know, wildlife technicians are great. We don't pay a lot for wildlife technicians. So, I mean, that can be a challenge, especially here in New Jersey. There's a higher cost of living. You know, so you know, there's trade-offs to that. You know, I think if you're willing, you know, like Amy was saying, you know, they hire seasonal people. You know, I hire seasonal people. I hire non-permanent positions here, term positions in New Jersey. You know, Fish and Wildlife Service hires kind of periodically, and there's, you know, other entities that are out there, whether it's Conserve Wildlife, you know, they're hiring a lot of positions, technician positions. You know, there's some other natural resources stuff that's out there. You know, it's you have to be willing, you know, to go where the jobs are and to accept jobs that may not pay what it is going to pay your student loans off.
And jobs that are not your dream job. I mean, those first jobs out of college are ladders and steps. It's not, it'll never just be, oh, here I am, I got my degree and I've arrived at my dream job. And there's a really interesting part of the seasonal circuit. Like, I did a seasonal job catching mink in South Carolina. Like, at the age I am now, I could never do that. Like, there's just too much structure in my life. But at that age, I was able to have those experiences. So maybe look at it like this is a real life opportunity, working these seasonal jobs and gaining all this experience, and then gaining the network you need to then lead you to that permanent dream job. I know Florida Game and Fish, I grew up in Florida, but I am the rare person who grew up in Florida. A lot of people, like my parents were not from Florida. So like Florida Game and Fish hires a lot. So if you really want to get a job, check out Florida, because people get jobs there, they get their experience, and then they're like, but I want to live back in Michigan, and they have the experience to compete for a job in Michigan. So Florida Game, that's a good place to start. And Conserve Wildlife, the Conserve Wildlife Foundation of New Jersey is a not-for-profit conservation organization. But most of the biologists I know that work there eventually move to a permanent job with the state. Again, like, they're really helping the state in a lot of ways. And so people who work for the state see you, work with you, they know your work ethic, they like, that's another kind of networking. So I think Conserve Wildlife probably doesn't pay great. You know, you probably would start as an intern, but that if you want to work for the state of New Jersey, that's a really good way to get in with them.
I'm going to jump in. I think that's the one thing when you come out of school, don't expect to be, you know, getting like Beth and Aaron said, you know, getting paid, you know, 80 grand a year right off the bat. You'd be surprised at people that come in the office that say, well, these are my student loans and this is what I need to make. That's not how it works. And, you know, it's your entry level is just that. It's likely going to be entry level, and it is a ladder, like Beth said. You know, you just don't expect to be, you know, going in making the big bucks. You know, wildlife and ecological field is not, you know, eventually you can make a very good living, and but that first entry level job, probably going to have to put in a year or two, and you're going to have to move up. But we've had a couple people come in and demand, you know, 80, 90 grand a year, and we're like, what are you talking about? So just as at least in the private field, again, I don't recall, it's been a long time, you know, with Fish and Wildlife Service, what exactly a pay grade is. But in terms of the private, I think maybe kids think that, well, it's private. Well, it's quite the opposite. You know, for an entry level, don't go in with big, high expectations that, like Beth said, it's going to be your dream, you know, and making big bucks. It's entry level is not how it works, at least in this field, at least again, in the private sector.
Yeah, and that situation that we're stuck with really is a barrier to diversity, right? Like for you to volunteer and take jobs without being paid, like that requires a level of privilege to be able to do that. So that's a real barrier to diversity for this career. And it's something we talk about in the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we're always giving feedback because, like, okay, you want all people who have the privilege, are either willing to borrow a bunch of money like me, or have the privilege of having somebody who can support them. Like, we're all the same people. Like that's not diverse. That's not diverse thinking. So it's definitely, that model is definitely a barrier to diversity. And it's something that we recognize, but with budget cuts year after year after year, to offer a paid position when people will do it for not being paid, it's tough, but we recognize it's definitely a barrier to diversity. And I think we're not as good as we could be for it.
So I happen to have the pay tables in front of me here. So like a 7-9 biologist, so at a GS7 level, it's $49,000 a year. At a GS9 level, it's $61,000 a year. And like wildlife technicians, I'm hiring as GS4, 5, 6s. So GS4 is 36,000 and GS6 is 44,000. I mean, so you're not going to get rich doing that, but those are your entry level positions and get your foot in the door. So, as Amy said, if you're trying to get an $80,000 salary, it's going to be tough starting out. But as she said, once you gain experience, then you can move on to your dream job back here in New Jersey and be good.
Do you have a lot of pride in your job? Is it worth being in a field that doesn't pay as well? Because I think that's why we're all here. I think that's why we're all in this degree, is that we have the hope that the job that we have is going to fulfill us in a way that's not just monetarily. So is there like a hopeful spin that we can put on it?
Well, I love my job. And again, I don't want to say that you're never going to make money. That's not the case. I'm quite comfortable. I have 2 kids. I'm 42 years old, and I'm not, again, I'm talking about you're coming out right after you're a senior in college. But I love my job. I love the people that we've brought on, that we work with. I love the variability that we have. I can do a wetland delineation one day, and I can do a snake survey the other day, and a turtle survey the next day. I can be in front of the computer one day, and then 2 days later, I'm out in the field, out in the woods, out in a wetland. So I personally love what I do. So yeah, it was worth that. A volunteer here, there, and coming out of school making, I think my first job was, I don't know, $25,000 a year, 30 grand a year. Again, that was a long time ago. But again, if you enjoy what you're doing, you'll get there. And yeah. I don't want to be the Debbie Downer of you're coming out of school and it's never going to be fruitful for you. But yeah,
no.
So
being realistic is so important. But yeah, it's nice to know that.
If you want to work in this field, I think what we're saying is, like, if you really want to work in this field, here's how to increase your odds and opportunities. I wouldn't say, oh, you're never going to get a job. Like, I don't think that's true, but you'll have a much easier time and you'll increase your chances of getting a job doing the things that we were talking about. And I think it also depends on what you're passionate about. So like those first jobs, man, they're fun. You're catching stuff, like they're so much fun. And then when you start moving up into pay grades and get more administrative responsibility, like you still have to figure out where is your passion. Like I'm really passionate about communication, because why am I doing this if people don't know that we're doing it and know how the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is changing the world and it's better for you as an American citizen? Like that to me, I'm really passionate about. Like, you guys, why is the Fish and Wildlife Service important? What are we doing for you? So I'm in more of an administrative position, but I also do a lot of field work because I write restoration plans. But you just have to see, as you advance in your career, you don't lose your passion, but like look where your passion fits into where you are now.
Yeah, don't let us scare you. I mean, jobs that I've had the most fun with my job and been proud of the job that I've been doing. Pretty much every job that I've had. Those entry level jobs, when you're out in the field every day, when you're trapping raccoons, or, in one case, I was in a plane dropping aerial rabies ORV baits out of an airplane. It's cool stuff that you get to do. And then, as Beth said, you kind of, eventually as you progress through your career, you're dealing with more regulations, you're dealing with, more project management, more planning, and that's just a different type of challenge. I look at my job as problem solving. When I was a technician in the field, it's okay, how do I keep wildlife from being a problem on this airfield? When I was a biologist, it's okay, we need to have maybe a deer management plan, and I have to write the NEPA documents for that. So I have to write the environmental assessment for that. It's just a different challenge. Now that I'm the state director, it's okay, we need to manage geese in New Jersey. How do we go about doing that? Okay, I need to hire X number of employees. How do I go ahead and get these employees? So, it's, sometimes you can't believe, multiple times in my career, I can't believe that I get paid for doing this. And that's a cool feeling when you're working.
I remember getting, when I was an undergrad, I remember getting the same talk from our professors, like, half of you aren't going to get a job. And so that said to me, okay, how do I be the other half that does get a job? And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Like, we want you to be that other half. We want to see you in, our companies or our meetings or our teams. Like, we want to see you guys be successful.
Yeah, it's a bit scary, but seems really fulfilling. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer because it's already 7. So I know Megan just signed on. Don't worry, we recorded it, so it'll be on YouTube, so you'll be able to see this. Is there any final questions that anybody has that's just like burning in your mind? Anybody have? Yeah.
I guess my question is, what is the outlook for like people, diversity and inclusion? Because I've seen so far for like our majors becoming more diverse over the past years, and I just want to know how's that gonna look for the future.
I think that's a great question, and it's something that the Fish and Wildlife Service is focusing on. I don't know if we're doing the right things, but some of the things that they're doing is, so like the job that I told you about that we're advertising, sometimes they'll take those jobs and they'll roll them into a national hire so that the person who's actually doing the hiring doesn't hire the person. And the thinking is like, okay, if we could put this candidate and have them interviewed by a group of people, maybe like there's enough people on this board to overcome whatever inherent implicit biases that we have. So I know they're trying things like that. Some of our positions go that way. I don't know if this position will go that way or not. The challenge with that is that all of that local knowledge that you might bring to your application kind of gets lost because like these are people who are not in New Jersey and the job is in New Jersey. So all that local knowledge gets lost. But that's one thing that they're trying. We have a diversity inclusion coordinator for our region for the Fish and Wildlife Service. We have up until this previous year, every year of my 10 years with the Fish and Wildlife Service required 2 years of equal opportunity and 2 years of diversity training. And we've had some great classes. Like I feel like I have learned a lot in those classes. this administration has canceled that diversity training for this year because they think that some of the training is, I don't know, people get upset about it. I don't know. I remember the first time I took a diversity class, I did get upset. I was like, I did not realize I had these biases. And until you look at really hard at them, you'll never see them. So I feel very privileged to have had that training. And I hope that in our new administration, we continue to take that training.
So, I think, pretty much most of the federal agencies and probably the state agencies that are out there, they're all looking to increase the diversity, of their staff. I think everybody's kind of realizing that there's kind of a, as Beth said, there's kind of a history, a trend where there hasn't been a whole lot of diversity in the wildlife field. I'm on the TWS Ethnic and Gender Diversity Subcommittee, and and it's that way across every, pretty much all agencies. So I think there's a push to try and diversify, the workforce, which I think is a great thing because it gives different perspectives. We've talked about, wildlife management is a lot about communicating. Well, how do we communicate with a diverse audience if we ourselves are not a diverse, workforce? So I think it's, there's progress being made. I'd like to see more progress being made. So.
Okay. If there's any final questions, you can ask them, but if not, we'll wrap up. Anybody have anything? All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I know it's a little late, and I know it's for all the students, it's finals and papers and craziness. I know I'm swamped with my thesis and I kind of, and to our panelists, I really appreciate it. I know it's time spent out of your day, but you probably just had a long work day, so I appreciate that. And anybody who's a student of the Wildlife Society, these are all state chapter Wildlife Society members. So if you join, these are people that you'll be able to communicate with in the future. So just want to plug the state chapter too.
It's a good networking opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, I want to thank you for asking us to come and talk with you. Because I'm also very passionate about developing our young professionals, and I'm like excited to see you guys and let you know there is a job in our office coming up, which doesn't get to happen very often. So register for a USA Jobs account and set up like an alert. And of course, when I get notice that we're advertising, I'll send it to Kelly to share with you. But yeah, it's really a privilege for us to talk to you and share what we know and just kind of help you get started in your careers.
Thank you.
Yes, good luck to you all. Kelly has my contact information. If anybody's interested in more information in regards to the private field, or if anybody, thinks to yourself, hey, it might be something I'm interested in, you can always send a resume. No promising that we have anything open, but it can't hurt. So yeah, good luck to you all. And again, I enjoy this. It's nice to pass along experience. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I also want to just say thanks for having us here. Quick plug, USDA Wildlife Services does have an internship set up with RUTWS that in the spring will come up. We're looking for folks to help us out with some goose management stuff. So quick plug, if you see it, apply for it. Also, if we ever get back to in-person meetings, come to a state chapter meeting. It's a great place to meet folks that potentially will be interviewing you or hiring you in your future.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.